Starting something new is almost always daunting, and skateboarding is no exception. After you've watched a few skate videos and have decided, yep, that's for me, most people are left with a lot of questions, and these are questions that this tutorial will aim to answer. Skateboarding in particular is difficult to start, as there's no local skate club that you can go and join and can show you the ropes, and you can feel as though you've been thrown in at the deep end. In actuality, skateboarding can be a lot easier to start than someone thinks for this very reason, because we have no courts, no lanes, and don't have to rely on any team or anyone. And there will always be those who can do more, and you can't control the levels of expertise around you, but you can control how hard you work. However, skateboarding is difficult, and progressing at times can seem impossible. So with this tutorial I'm aiming to make skating as easy as possible to begin and show the basics of how to skateboard. The first thing to do when beginning skateboarding is purchase a skateboard, and this can be harder than it sounds, knowing what type to buy and whatnot. So I would highly recommend, if possible, going to a local skate shop. However, some places obviously won't have this, so online the two best places to look I think are Skate Hut and Route 1. Now, the first choice that you'll have to make after having found a place to buy your skateboard is whether to buy Complete, which is a board that's already set up for you and will be delivered with all the parts together, or buying the separate parts and setting it up yourself, which I would recommend just because it's good to learn, and it's handy if your skateboard ever breaks to know how to fix it. Now, if you're buying a separate board or a Complete, there'll be different sizes, and I would say that for most people, on average, a size 8 width deck will be the best size for you, although if you know you have slightly smaller or bigger feet, size up or down by a quarter inch or a half inch accordingly. After buying a deck, you'll need to get trucks, which are the silver metal things that attach to the underside of the board, and then you put wheels on, which allow you to turn. Now, these will have a size that will correlate to the deck width that you've picked, and to find out what sizes go with what deck sizes, just look in the description of the trucks on the website and it will say, or if you're in a skate shop, just ask someone and they'll let you know. Next two things you'll have to buy are wheels and bearings. Now, wheels are self-explanatory, any old wheels will do on a skateboard. What really matters are the bearings inside them, as these are what will actually get the wheel to spin more smoothly. Now, I'd recommend Bones bearings just because it's what I've used and I can say that they're the best ones out there. The final two things you'll need to buy are grip tape and a skate tool. Grip tape is the black sandpaper-like material that will lie across the top of your board and allow your feet to grip the board to do tricks and whatnot. And a skate tool is a tool that has 3 attachments to it with 3 different bolt sizes, and you can use it to tighten your trucks or attach your wheels, and it's just handy to have if anything ever breaks. So now you have all the parts to your skateboard, you are ready to begin the board setup. So to begin, sort of press the bearings into the wheels as best you can. This can be quite tough, so really push, or what I like to do is get the actual truck itself, put the wheel onto it and push down onto the truck, and the bearings should slot in a little bit more easily than just doing it by hand. So what you're going to want to do is get a hold of your grip tape next, make sure it's the right size for your board and everything, and then peel it off, trying not to let it stick to anything, it can be quite tricky. And once you've got hold of it, press it down onto the board, making sure all areas of the board are covered. And when you're pressing it down, just push down lightly at first and make sure that you're not, leaving any air bubbles, which can be hard to see. Now, this is something that I forgot to mention during the actual tutorial and that caught me out here while we were filming, is to mention not to skateboard in the rain or attempt to set up a skateboard in the rain, because it ruins the board, and more importantly it ruins the bearings and your wheels won't spin properly, so don't do that. Once you're confident that there aren't any air bubbles, sort of make sure all areas around the edges are pushed down properly, and then you can grab a tool of some sort, it can be a screwdriver, it doesn't really matter, and just start sort of pressing down around the edges, sort of filing it down, and you'll see a white line sort of appearing where the edges are. It's quite easy to spot. and this is just to sort of soften the edges, and you can then cut in using a Stanley knife box cutter and begin to sort of scrape off the excess grip tape. I would recommend, controversially, cutting towards you, as this is easier, so be careful. Cutting away from you can make it a whole lot more difficult and you won't get smooth edges. It doesn't matter too much around the corners if you don't get it perfect, because you can come back later and sort of fix it, and obviously we sand it down at the end, so it's not going to be a huge issue if you don't make the perfect cut on your first attempt. So just try and remove as much of the excess grip tape as possible. It doesn't matter, as I said, if you don't get rid of all of it, because you can just come back to it later, and you're never going to get a perfect cut. I'm struggling, as you can see here. You're never going to get a perfect cut on your first attempt doing it. So once you can't really get off any more, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get a bit of the excess grip tape that you've had cut off, and then fold it over and just sort of begin sanding down the edges of the board, removing bits of grip tape and just making sure the edges are pressed down firmly so that they won't come up when you're doing tricks and whatnot, which is just sort of very handy to have, and it looks nicer when you're finished and you'll have a clean looking board. So what you're going to want to do next is get out the knife again and place bolts through the wrong way through the hole, and it'll press up the grip tape where the hole is, and you can see it easily, and then just make small incisions with the knife in each of the holes for the bolts, and this will just mean that you won't have to punch the holes with the bolts later, and it just gives you a nicer looking finish and it won't break the grip tape. So just begin sort of pushing each of the bolts through their hole, and if this is too difficult you can smack them down using the bottom of a truck. Now once you've got all the holes punched and the bolts through each of them, you're just going to want to lightly place the trucks over them. Make sure you've got something underneath like a knee, or do it over a bench or something so the bolts don't just fall right through. But once you've got the truck in place, you're going to want to get some bolt caps and just sort of screw them on lightly. Don't worry about getting them too tight, just have it so that the bolts won't fall through and the trucks won't fall off, and that's all that really matters. And once you get this done, what you can do is get the attachment out of the skate tool, place that into the bolt, and then just tighten them up and make sure everything's very secure, because you don't want your trucks falling off when you're skating, obviously. So just really tighten them as much as possible. You also want it so that it sort of pulls the bolt down through the grip tape, sort of, so that you don't feel the bolts pressing up against your feet when you're riding around on the board, because obviously that's not a nice feeling. And then you're sort of done. That's about it. The board should look like this. It'll look clean. You've just then got to attach the wheels, and you've already put the bearings in the wheels earlier, so that shouldn't be a problem. Just slot them on, put the washers on top of the wheel so that the bearings don't rub against the bolt cap, and then just sort of place these on lightly, and you can come back around later to tighten them. And you'd use a different attachment on the skate tool for this. It's slightly bigger, and you just tighten them on, and to test whether the wheels are tight enough, just sort of rattle them back and forth slightly. This just sort of tests to make sure if they're too loose, you won't go, you want, it's basically a sweet spot. You don't want it too loose and you don't want it too tight, and you can sort of see here that's what I'm doing. You just want it just barely able to move, and then it'll spin nicely, and then you're pretty much done. You're ready to set off, start learning some tricks, I guess. Now, I would say the first well, it's not really a trick, but the first thing you should learn once you've got your skateboard set up is just rolling around, getting comfortable on it, because this is a really good basis to then learn further, more advanced tricks, and it's just really good to learn first. And so long as you're comfortable, everything will sort of come naturally from this. So what you're going to want to do first is decide if you're regular or goofy, and this is basically just which foot you put forwards when you skate. And I would decide this by figuring out which way you'd run and jump out onto an ice rink with, so what foot you put first, and sort of you can step onto your board at first and then begin to sort of run and jump on, which obviously is more difficult for me when riding regular. So here is just sort of throwing down your board, which is sort of, it's a cooler way of starting to skate, and you can just sort of do it anywhere, and it is just handy, and I think it's a cool thing to learn. Can take a bit of time, but there's no real trick to it. Start off slow, and just sort of also get comfortable on your board, learn how to sort of roll around, sort of figure out how you like to turn, and it'll all just come naturally. It's just time you've got to spend on your board. So here's a demonstration of a carved turn, and this is where you just sort of use your body weight. You lean on your heels and your toes to turn. You don't lift up the front of the board at all, you just lean. And what you want to do is it's all in the knees and with the feet. You just sort of want to bend your heels down. So here is more of a kick turn. This is where you lean back on the back of the board, press your left foot or your right foot back, and just pick up the front of the board to turn. And this can be for sharper corners, so you sort of need a mixture of both. Finally, the last thing you can really learn to do when rolling is just dropping off of curbs. And this, all you really have to do is, as you approach, as your nose reaches the edge of the curb you want to drop off, just lift up a fraction so that you can just roll off smoothly. This is definitely for more advanced people. And if you want to do this off of higher objects, be careful of clipping your tail. And that's pretty much it for rolling round. I mean, it's really just about the amount of time you spend on your board. So if you're dedicated enough, skate anywhere within skating distance or cycling distance, just skateboard it. So you can learn all of these little tricks that'll just really help you out when just rolling around, and really help when you're trying to learn harder tricks and when you're doing tricks that are more advanced moving. The first trick you're going to learn is the ollie. This is the beginner trick on which all later tricks are built upon, and it's just good to combine with the other things, sort of like rolling around so you can hop up curbs. So the first thing you want to get with the ollie is the foot position. You want one foot just behind the bolts horizontally, and then the ball of your foot perched on the tail, so you're ready to push down when you pop up. And this is sort of key for doing this. You want to learn to just press down on the back of the board and get comfortable doing this movement. You also want to get comfortable with this movement, which is the second part of the ollie, just sliding your foot up. You should see a white mark just sort of appearing from your shoes, and yeah, you'll just practice these two steps over and over until you feel really comfortable doing it. And then you're ready to start putting the motions together and actually ollieing. This is quite tricky at first, so you just want to really focus on pressing down that back foot, slamming it into the floor and jumping up with the board, and your foot should slide naturally. Now you want your foot to slide so that you get it from this position, which is a rocket ollie, and it will just level it out in the air into this position, which is a flat ollie, which is what you want. And then you can bring it down nicely. So next what you're going to want to do is learn to do this moving. Now some people actually find this easier, doing it at a bit of speed. You might want to try it a bit slower at first. It doesn't really matter, whatever's best for you, and it'll be easier the more comfortable you are on your board. It's the same thing. The balance is a bit different when you land, because you just have to be a little bit more stable as you come off. Now once you're good at this, you can start ollieing off of curbs, and it's the same principle. You just want to be very sort of secure in your ollie before you try this. You can also ollie up curbs, and this is just handy for rolling around, cruising around. You want to be able to go up and down curbs. So the key tip for going off of them is that when you're at the edge of the curb, and just sort of when your board is at a position as the nose hits the edge of the curb, you can begin the ollie and just pop off, and it'll be the same as rolling off of something. Obviously going faster helps when you do this off of higher objects, I would say, so sort of increase your speed, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but it definitely helps, as you're less likely to catch your tail when you're doing this. Now for some common mistakes, one of the biggest is not sliding your foot enough when you pop down, or not jumping up with the board. Now this can be sort of make your ollies look really ridiculous, go very rocket, and they won't level out in the air. And to fix this, just go over that step of just that motion of moving your foot up the board, see that white line appear as you slide your foot. Another mistake is not popping down hard enough and not jumping with the board and letting it come up under you, which is a real problem because your ollies won't get very high, you won't have time to level it out. So what you want to do is really, as you press down, slam the tail into the ground and jump up with the board. As you can see here, I lift my back leg up and that allows the board to come up under me and be leveled out. And that's about it for the ollie, I think. Just go through all of these steps and you'll be a master in no time. Okay, so the second trick you're going to learn is the front side 180. This is essentially an ollie, but you twist your upper body and your legs follow, and you do sort of a 180 as you're rolling a roll away fakie. Now this trick is fairly simple, very similar to the ollie. What you want to have the same foot position, your front foot just down from those bolts so you can slide it up, and the ball of your back foot perched on the tail. And you're going to want to practice the same exact motions, just popping that tail down and then combining that pop down with the slide up of the front foot. And this will be completely fine if you've got your ollies down. This will be no problem. You also need to add in the turn of the upper body, which may seem quite silly, but at first this is quite unnatural. So once you can do all three of these steps and combine them into one, you're ready to start trying the trick. I personally find it quite difficult to do this trick standing still, because it's almost sort of a trick designed to do moving, just to switch the way you're facing and go to a fakie stance. So I would say maybe practice a few times standing still, but I'd say for the majority of your time you should practice this trick moving. And what I like to do is focus on a point behind me as I turn, and know that point behind me before I turn, and whip my body around to look at that point and focus on it, and your legs just sort of naturally follow your body. So don't get too caught up on it. It's essentially just an ollie with your upper body also turning. And that's about it for it really. As I said, it's all in the upper body, and if you've got your ollies down, this trick shouldn't take you too long to learn. So the next trick that you'll be learning is the backside 180. This is very similar to the frontside 180, except sort of in reverse. It's a little bit more difficult because it seems more uncomfortable just that way you turn. So it's exactly obviously the same as the ollie and the frontside 180 in the foot position, and it's the same steps that you have to run through. You should have the other tricks down by now, so this shouldn't be anything different for you. Now what you want to add in is, apart from the foot slide up the board, is you turning, and this is going to be the opposite direction to a front side, and I really want to emphasize this turn and getting comfortable doing it, because it seems very uncomfortable at first, and it makes you lose your balance a lot if you don't have this turn sort of natural. Again, it's harder to do standing still. I highly recommend you don't do it standing still, as I was having trouble with it here, just because it's slightly, I don't know, it's designed to do moving. And here's a perfect example of it, although I was going slightly uphill on these. So you just want to really turn. It's the same as the front side. The trick is all in the upper body, and turning it's just a bit more uncomfortable. I really shouldn't have been trying this uphill. Yeah, as you can see, it just sort of slows me down. In fact, that might be a good way of trying it, is going downhill if you need a little bit more momentum. There you go, it's sort of rolling a bit more. But yeah, it's a tricky trick, and it's very difficult to get the hang of at some points. And some of the common errors are sort of falling off backwards and just leaning a bit too far back. And I'd recommend just keep practicing that turn, because that turn is really all that it comes down to. And if you focus on that, you won't have these issues of leaning back too much, and you'll have this trick down in no time. It's sort of a continuation of the front side. It's just another variation for you to try, and honestly I don't think it's too difficult. It's just uncomfortable, and you'll get it fairly quickly. So the next trick you'll be learning is the pop shove it, and this can be slightly daunting as it's the first trick that has the board moving around independent from you, unlike the 180s that you've learnt before. And it can catch you on the shin and be quite painful, but it should be fine. You want the same foot position as an ollie, except you want your toe of your back foot perched right on the edge, ready to scoop the board round underneath you. And with your front foot, you don't want to do anything with it except lift it up off the board. You don't want to flick, don't want to do anything with it. It's all in the back foot. You just pull the board round underneath you and put both feet back on. If you want, you can start off by just putting one foot back on, just putting the front foot on and getting used to it, and that will make you less likely when you do commit to put two on. It will make the board less likely to flick up and hit you in the shin. You don't want to pull your front foot away. You want to keep it over the board at all times, or the board might come around and hit your shin, and trust me, it's very painful. Slightly easier moving, I feel like, again, just because it adds a bit of momentum, makes the push and the shove a little bit more easy. But again, just a lot of practice on this one, perhaps taking one foot off, and you'll get it down in no time. So up next is a more advanced trick, the fakie big spin. It's the first trick that combines two previous tricks, but I feel like doing this trick in the fakie stance makes it quite a simple trick for you to do. It's not too challenging. Now it combines the backside 180, which you should have down by now, and in the fakie stance these are honestly easier, and the same with the shove it's. Both tricks are actually easier for me in the fakie position, so this shouldn't be a problem. Same foot position as a shove it. Obviously you're going in the opposite direction though, so you're going to want to practice sort of turning in that direction slightly, just pivoting around, because that's sort of the main aim of the trick. Get used to riding in fakie, which is just rolling with your back foot going forward like that. Now the other things that you're going to have to get the hang of are backside 180s fakie, called a half cab. It's not that difficult, should be able to do it, not too much challenge. And the fakie shove it, obviously, which is, again, it's easier than normal. It will take a couple of tries to get used to twisting it around and rolling away in fakie, but it's not too challenging. And then you can begin trying the fakie big spin. Again, like you did with the shove it at first, it might be easier putting just one foot on, or if you're going to commit fully to it, that's better, and you can just jump with both feet, landing both of them on the board and pulling it round a little bit at the end if you need to. And yeah, that's really all there is to it. It's all in the back foot. Just really whip it round, keep your front foot over the board to make sure it doesn't flip at all, and you'll get it in no time at all. Now the next trick that you'll be learning is the front side shove it. This trick is a little bit difficult. It's probably the hardest trick out of the lot so far, but with a lot of practice you should get it down. Now first off, the most important thing is the foot position. You want your front foot the same as a normal shove it, but your back foot sort of the opposite. You want it perched right on the edge so you can sort of shove the board forwards and down into the ground. You should also practice just jumping off backwards, because you kind of need to jump backwards to land on the board when you actually do the trick. So I'm just sort of showing how you need to sort of scoop the board forwards, just shove it into the ground and forwards, and there you go. And then you'll probably lose balance the first few times you try it, but you'll get it. It's quite tricky. It's that jump backwards you have to get used to. As you can see there, the board goes backwards, so you have to move with it, and you sort of have to, unlike other tricks, you have to really think about this as you do it, and you'll start getting it down. It's a little bit tricky to do standing still, but you'll get it. I mean, it's like the other shove it. It can be a little bit easier. You get the momentum a bit more easily when you're moving, so the shove doesn't have to be as hard. But obviously landing it is a bit more difficult. Again, you could try doing it with one foot, but I find this quite difficult. But whatever works for you to get you doing the trick properly, get you getting it down. And with practice, it'll just come. So just really work on getting that front foot pushed down into the board. You could try it fakie if you would like I'm doing here, and that also helps. But yeah, it's a fairly tricky trick, but you can get it down. Now the next trick and the final trick is the kickflip. This is a very challenging trick. It'll take a lot of attempts to get this right, as the motion is sort of different to any other tricks that you will have tried, but you will get it down eventually. So the steps are just to practice the same pop down as the ollie, and more of a diagonal slide of the toe up off the edge of the board, off the top right corner of it. Now you don't want to be flicking down when you do this. It's a common mistake. People sort of feel like the board will flip easier if they flip it that way, but you will never get your foot back on. So the key feature for this trick is just to get that flick, and just flick off the corner. You can see where the white mark is. Now I took photos of this just to demonstrate the correct way to flick, because this is the most common mistake possibly in the whole of skateboarding, is people flicking down from kickflips, and if you do that you can't get your foot back on. And this is just illustrating how you really need to flick up off the top of your board, and really you should feel sort of the end of your shoe sort of twanging off the edge of the board, if that makes sense. You'll feel it when you do it correctly, the sort of that it's worked. So once you've got this flick down, you're ready to start trying them. Now you will struggle to land the first few. You might land primo, which is where you land on the trucks and flop over, but you'll get it down, and then you're ready to start moving. And this is very difficult because you've got so many different parts of the trick to focus on, and you tend to mess up when you aren't concentrating. You have to really think about what you're trying to do as you roll up and you're about to do the trick. So really think through each of those steps and you'll be able to catch it. And it's a difficult trick because of that. There's so many different components that you have to think about, and you have to put them all together so quickly. But with a lot of practice, and really I can't emphasize more that flick, getting that flick right, and as well as that, getting the timing between the pop and the flick is key. And when you put all of that together, soon enough you will be able to complete a kickflip and land it. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial. I hope it's helped you in any way or in lots of ways, and have fun progressing at skateboarding.